So, The Last Jedi. Since the release of this movie, it's a period of civil war in the fandom. People who love the movie say people who don't can't accept change and must not really be Star Wars fans, but haters because since this is a Star Wars movie, if you don't like this movie, then you don't like Star Wars because this is Star Wars. And also, you don't really understand this movie or what Rian Johnson was going for. You don't understand it was about loss and failure and that anyone can be a Jedi. And it's not about one family and how fanboys are mad because they put Luke on a pedestal and had preconceived notions which are shattered and so on. And people who didn't like this movie say that people who did like it are blind sheep who must not be true Star Wars fans because no true fan could watch this movie and not be angry. And if you aren't angry, then you're a poser and a fake fan and don't really understand Star Wars. Firstly, everyone is entitled to their opinion, whether you thought it was a masterpiece with a beautiful meta message, or whether you thought it was a dumpster fire that just twisted the knife, or rubbed salt in the wound, was the straw that broke the camel's back, or what have you, and Darth Disney absolutely ruined Star Wars. You are entitled to that opinion. In my opinion, I found several flaws with this movie, as well as several great aspects. For this video, I'll be going through a lot of these points, some good, some bad, as well as my absolute main point of disagreement with this movie. I don't expect everyone to agree with my points of view, but perhaps I could do a bit to help end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. First off, a small observation I noticed on different threads and videos on the internet, there seem to be two loose groups. If people love the Jedi stuff, including the parts with Luke, then they probably hated the stuff with Finn and Rose and other secondary characters. If you hated particularly the Luke stuff, then you may not have minded the Finn and Rose and other stuff so much. Though, of course, there are those that don't perfectly fit into either of those groupings because a lot of people just didn't like the Finn stuff at all, but that's just something I noticed. Now, I think Kylo's dialogue throughout a lot of this movie is parallel to Rian Johnson and maybe some others' ideology on how this movie and the Star Wars universe should be, when he says things like, "Let the past die. Kill it if you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be." And to get rid of everything old like Snoke, Luke, the Jedi, the Sith. Just think about those lines in the context of how they've affected the Star Wars universe in comparison with everything before this movie, and it fits pretty well. They've massively taken steps to let the past die. I heard someone say Luke throwing his lightsaber behind him at the beginning is the perfect metaphor for what has happened. If the lightsaber represents everything previous we knew about Star Wars, like the lightsaber, it was just thrown away. Now, depending on your certain point of view, this could be a good or a bad thing. If you're tired of the same old, you may say, well, this was a really bold decision and he's not going to have Star Wars being the same and we've got so much exciting new stuff to come, so yay. But you also could see it as Star Wars is about something. It has a flow, the films rhyme, as George would say. It's okay to be bold and different as long as you don't eliminate what makes Star Wars, and this film did that. It just didn't feel like Star Wars at a lot of points. Both are valid opinions, but to me, I really think they had a major misstep with this movie. Now, after I saw this movie the first time, I left the theater in a state of shock. It's not that I thought the movie was that bad after the first viewing. I didn't hate it. Cinematically, it was a good movie, but I couldn't quite process what I had just seen. For one thing, I couldn't quite tell sometimes what was real, what was vision, or what was flashback. It was just confusing sometimes. But more than all that, they had just made Luke a sad hermit who considered killing his own nephew and hid on an island, abandoning everyone, came back at the end, and then died. What? But I could tell that I just really need to see the movie again. Now that I know what's going to happen, there's less shock and I can just watch the movie now and try to pick up on things that I missed. And I will say that I did like the movie better the second time, but the problems that I had with it the first time were still there, especially since I watched Episode VI again right before just to compare. I mean, it's the same movie. I'm able to look past certain things better, sure, but it's still got a lot of problems. I do appreciate that he tried to do something different, don't get me wrong. But you can do something different without doing it wrong, though. Even Mark Hamill agrees they totally messed up Luke. Just watch.
When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character. But, other than that, I can't really describe more, but it was as shocking to me to read what Ryan had written as I'm sure it will be for the audience.
Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end. I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does. I mean, a Jedi is optimistic. A Jedi has tenacity. He never gives up. He doesn't secrete himself on an island. But you'll see. I said to Ryan, I said, Jedis don't give up. I mean, even if he had a problem, he would maybe take a year to try and regroup. But if he made a mistake, he would try and right that wrong. So right there, we had a fundamental difference. But it's not my story anymore. It's somebody else's story. And Ryan needed me to be a certain way to make the ending effective. That's the crux of my problem. Luke would never say that. I'm sorry. Well, in this version, see, I'm talking about the George Lucas Star Wars. This is the next generation of Star Wars. So I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker, but I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story well. But listen, I still haven't accepted it completely, but it's only a movie. I hope people like it. I hope they don't get upset. And I came to really believe that Ryan was the exact man that they needed for this job.
That should tell you something. But we'll get into Luke in a minute. A major theme to me about this movie is disrespect. This movie, in its attempt to be different and bold and brave and groundbreaking, just threw away so much of what made Star Wars Star Wars. Firstly, something about the tone of the movie just didn't feel like a Star Wars movie to me. It's difficult to quantify, but just go watch some of the other movies and then watch 8 again, and you'll see what I mean. 7 was a bit different as well, but the thing about 7 was that, yeah, there was criticism, but much less fundamentally than this one. You've got fans missing J.J. Abrams directing these movies. People are wanting J.J. to come back and save Star Wars. Let that sink in, as they gave him a hard time as well. But yeah, just for the sake of being different, they did things like getting rid of Snoke. A lot of supporters of that movie are saying we're just fanboys who had preconceived notions and it's not the movie's fault that we were speculating. That goes for the raised parents thing too, by the way. But the thing is, we were baited into this speculation. Several years in The Force Awakens, they were like, who's the girl? Or we saw a vision with her parents and the lightsaber showing her things, saying, these are the next steps. Maz telling her it calls to her now, like the previous movie hyped her up so much in her origins, causing people to speculate for the next 2 years. Same with Snoke. He was hyped up as well. Of course, people want to know who this new big bad is. But you know what? He's dead. That's who. You know who Rey's parents are? They're nobody. What, you thought she was a Skywalker? A Kenobi? A Jinn? A Palpatine? Your fault for thinking, bro. Also, why was there a map to Luke Skywalker if he supposedly hid in the most unfindable place in the galaxy to die? Don't worry about it, I guess. The thing is, it's been confirmed that Rian Johnson was basically given complete creative control to do what he wanted with what J.J. Abrams started. I will finish what you started, as Kylo would say. And he decided to just chuck it. Which, back to our topic of disrespect, shows that the movie doesn't even respect the one other title in its own trilogy, let alone from any of the others. It's almost like we're starting over, and now JJ has to come back to what Ryan did to his thing and patch it up. Like, they clearly don't have an overarching plan for this trilogy, and it's two people fighting over their ideas of what it should be and what direction Star Wars should go, with the fate of the canon hanging in the balance. Characters were also heavily disrespected in this movie, and not just Han and Luke, but also Admiral Akbar, one of the most beloved non-human characters. They brought him back just to be sucked out of an airlock. Too bad he couldn't Superman fly back, though. Now, sure, Leia could have been a Jedi, and I actually would have loved it if she were one of Luke's Jedi Masters or Knights in Episode VII, but that didn't happen. But yeah, I'm not really mad about her using the Force, although it looked a bit weird in that scene, and she'd never been shown to use it like that before, and she's also used it to blow up or push in the door later when she's going to stun Poe. Too bad she couldn't have grabbed Akbar too, though, or they couldn't write it so he had some sort of respected end. Like he just dies off screen like that. Mon Calamari lives matter, people. Jeez. And as for Han, he just died alone. Just some people who he just met looking up from, high up as he falls to his doom. He's stabbed to death by his own brat of a son. At least Chewie was there, I guess. Here's what Mark Hamill thought should happen, which I agree with.
Are you bummed that Luke didn't get sort of a reunion with Han Solo?
Absolutely. In fact, when I was reading it, I thought, if Leia's trying to mentally contact me and she's not successful, she'll rush to his aid. She'll get close to him and then get into some dire situation, and that's when I show up for a big yay, save her life. Then we rush to Han and are in the same position that Rey and Finn and Chewie are. Too late to save him, but witnesses. And I say, because it would carry so much emotional resonance into the next film. For us, his wife, his best friend to witness, instead of two characters that've known him, what, 20 minutes? Well, Chewie.
I get the themes Johnson was trying to do, okay, I really do, but just not in a Star Wars movie, please. Like, one of the things he was trying to say was that you don't have to be of special blood or anything to be special. You can just be some random person and do great things. But they're acting like we don't already know that. Nearly all of the Jedi in the Jedi Order were always random people. The Jedi weren't allowed to be in relationships, and most of them never had kids, which means their parents weren't Jedi either. Current Jedi seek the galaxy and find baby Force sensitives and bring them back to the temple for training to become the next generation of Jedi. All of them are random people. The main saga just happens to focus on one particular family. Even other beloved characters had random parents. Obi-Wan, Yoda, Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Kit Fisto, heck, even Anakin. Shmi was just a random lady. Either way, we would absolutely love movies or TV series focusing on other characters, so that's not a Star Wars lesson we needed to be taught. So before we get into some of the more heavy stuff, some random things here and there. Some good, some bad. The humor was kind of weird. Like, it was funny, but then you're like, why? Luke drinking the milk. It was weird. Haha. I did like the characters more this time though, like Finn. I see a lot of people didn't like the Canto Bite stuff. Personally, I didn't mind that so much. It was weird, yeah, but like, it's whatever. At least it's a bit of a character development thing, you know, sort of. Even though it was unnecessary, if Poe had been told the plan by Holdo, they didn't even get the right code breaker, and a lot of people died due to his betrayal. But sure. Also, I liked Snoke, when he was like, "The dark side rises, and the light to meet it." I don't know, that character was cool. I just love that line. Like, he was powerful and he knew it. Crazy powerful even. Then he's just killed off. Some say maybe he's not dead. For now though, if he's dead, to me it's just a waste. But sure. Also, Force Ghosts can summon lightning from the heavens now. That could have been useful in a million areas before. Or like, right now. Strike down Kylo, please. Yoda, please help. Also, can we just have a ship on autopilot to hyperspace ram through all the major capital ships? Can that be a thing now? I still thought Rey seemed a bit too good at everything still. Heck, even Yoda said she already knows everything she needs or whatever. Some people are saying she's no more OP this early on than Luke was. I laugh at that. Yeah, it would have been really easy to write her as being Luke's daughter if they wanted to. I mean, they didn't have to, but like, maybe he left her there to protect her from the dangers of the dark side while he worked to eliminate it or something. Similar to how he was left on a desert world after his father was corrupted by the dark side. Could say he had people there to protect her too, but they died. Like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru died. Except way earlier. Something like that. But I get it, not everyone has to be a Skywalker. Which I get, you know, they don't have to. But another sad, at least to me, aspect of this movie is that the name Skywalker is now gone. Think about that. Yeah, the blood still exists in Ben and in this generation, but he's a Solo by name, not a Skywalker. Luke was the last one, and as far as we know, he had no kids, so that's like a permanent thing for the whole no more Skywalker sentiment. Unless JJ writes it in 9 that Luke had a secret kid or something, which I wouldn't mind. As for the Reylo stuff, the Rey and Kylo stuff, I didn't really mind that so much personally. Even though practically it's weird because she just saw him murder his own father and hurt Finn a few days ago, so it seems weird there's like a romantic tension there. Also, their late night video chatting, where they could even touch each other and water could be transferred, was different. But then they explain it was Snoke. He was the phone line all along. So I'm like, okay, he's super strong, sure. But then Snoke is dead, and then they do it again at the end of the movie. So I don't know what's going on with that. But sure. A couple of things to note. I did see some parallels to Empire Strikes Back. Kylo is basically saying to Rey, Luke never told you what happened at his temple. Kind of like how Vader was saying, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. Rey leaves early to try to redeem someone. Luke left his training early, later wanted to redeem Vader. Sure. And that trippy scene where Rey was like in the mirrors or whatever a million times and they baited you into thinking you're about to find out who her parents are. That scene, I guess that's basically like Luke being on Dagobah. She goes to a place strong in the dark side, has weird vision, looks behind the fog on the mirror just like Luke looked behind Vader's mask. She sees her own face just like Luke saw his own face. So I do appreciate that parallel, though it seemed a bit weird as a scene. And speaking of scenes, I thought the following one was funny, where Rey and Kylo are like alone video chatting, then it becomes more, and then they touch hands, and it's like this big moment. OMG, they're touching. And then Luke bursts in like a dad and is like, "What are you doing? I told you to stay away from my daughter." And they just stare at him like, "OMG, Dad, no! Oh no, Mr. Skywalker, I'm so sorry, I'll go." And then Luke blows the hut apart. That was hilarious to me. But then the gall on Rey as Luke tells her to go, and then, he's walking away. This girl assaults Luke in the back of the head with her pole thing. Then they start stick fighting, and she grabs the lightsaber. Just the nerve. And then they basically have her win the fight, the stick fight. Rey basically defeated Jedi Master Luke Skywalker in a sword fight. Such disrespect, man. Screw Rey. If she wasn't the only option currently, I wouldn't teach her anything either, just for that thwack. But now for the bulk of my argument. Literally everything you just heard, besides maybe the thwacking thing, I could forgive. I watched the movie again, and I was like, whatever. I can't just expect a perfect movie, apparently. But one thing I absolutely cannot forgive as long as it remains canon, and that's what they did with Luke Skywalker. They absolutely destroyed his character. Rian Johnson said he thought Luke was in the way of Rey, so he gotta go. Rey was in the way of Luke. Long before this movie came out, I said the biggest thing they shouldn't do is ruin Luke Skywalker. If they messed up Luke, that would be the absolute worst thing they could possibly do to Star Wars. Also, if Rey somehow became the last of the Jedi, I guess they heard me. So they just say, let's do that. This character we saw here was not Luke Skywalker. Honestly, this portrayal of him was just wrong and incredibly disrespectful. You saw what Mark Hamill had to say about it. He, as well as I, fundamentally disagree with just about everything they decided to do with his character. And just his face at the premiere, look at this, said it all. This was not Luke. Also, don't give me any of that about how he was a broken man and that adds humanity to his character and, just everything that happened broke him. No, because according to Luke's own account, there was a flaw with their rendition of his character, even before he was so-called broken. Just Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, no First Order, not broken. He senses some dark side in Kylo and then thought to kill him. That he thought to kill him in his sleep. His own nephew, the child of his best friend and his sister. Now someone's probably saying, well, that's just a bold statement of Luke's humanity. He wasn't the legend people thought. He was just a man. I love the humanity they added to the character. No. Men still have natures and their own personal character, and this was not Luke's. This is the man, after all, who saw a tiny ounce of good in his father that he just met, who, by the way, was one of the biggest hyper-mass murderers and evil men in the entire galaxy, and he redeemed him. So he could bring Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader, back to the light, but didn't immediately think that the same could be done for Ben, his nephew? And now he's so irredeemable? Vader slaughtered 12 children, and many of his friends immediately after turning to the dark side. Then for the next 24, 25 years, did a lot more killing. Yet he wasn't too far gone, But your nephew, who hasn't actually done anything yet, maybe should be killed in his sleep. And yeah, Rey mentioned that was how he failed Kylo, but mentioning it doesn't excuse what's going on here. Luke would never have done that. not the real Luke. That's just bad writing. Just like Hamill was saying, he had to pretend it was like Jake Skywalker or something like that, because that just was not Luke Skywalker. He hasn't been broken yet, people, so that's no excuse for writing the character this way. So not only that, but then in his guilt, he goes into exile to die? Yeah, my theory video on why Luke said the Jedi should end, like this one, was completely wrong. I assumed that they were going to be decent with his character. And maybe he was seeking the first Jedi temple and those books so he could figure out the original path of the Jedi and restore them to what they should be and bring the order back that way, you know? But nah, he's just giving up. He's a loser. Just like Yoda said, he didn't heed his words to pass on what he had learned. He tried, but in his failing, he just decides to give up. And to add to that, by giving up, he chose to abandon everyone. His sister Leia, his best friend Han, R2, his buddy, and all the innocent children and sentient creatures across the galaxy, just everyone. Even hearing that Han died, and that Leia was in trouble, and the Resistance was in trouble, and they would lose all major systems in a matter of weeks. Not to mention they had already blown up several planets in the Republic, right? The capital planets or whatever. That wasn't enough to motivate him to get up and do something. He's just gonna let it all burn, you know, the New Republic, his friends, his family, the Jedi, himself. Snoke and Kylo and the First Order could have it all. Nothing he could or would do about it. You know, it's like he completely forgot all the lessons he's ever learned. It's just not his character. In Empire Strikes Back, he left his training early because he sensed his friends were in danger. He went against the wishes of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, knowing he could face Vader. He could get killed, but left anyway to save his friends. He was a hero. He lost a hand, sure, but he was successful. There's nothing that happened to Luke that would explain how he became this pseudo Skywalker. You know? It's just so out of character. It doesn't make any sense at all. Like, they just wrote a completely different person and called him Luke Skywalker. That's what they did. And he seemed to have to try to justify his decision to leave it all and die by saying how it's vanity to assume that if the Jedi die, then the Force dies or whatever. That's absolutely true. The Force will go on. It's a natural thing, or supernatural thing. But what about the fate of the galaxy? What about freedom? What about justice? Yeah, you're just connected to the Force in a way many other people are not, and if you're gone, the Force itself will be fine, sure, but the people won't. There's a reason that the Jedi, for all their faults, were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy for 1,000 generations. Yeah, in the last few decades, they did fail. They became complacent at some point, sure, and that's why I was expecting Luke to, be looking to find what they were supposed to be, to help bring them back to what they were meant to be. What they used to be long before they became complacent. Guardians, strong in the Force, doing the good work to keep evil at bay. And they kept it up all these years, even when there wasn't a Sith around for 1,000 years, because that's the job. But Luke? No. What? A Jedi shouldn't help people. They just mess things up. I'll just let evil people murder and enslave everyone. Better than me screwing it up with my so-called heroic antics. Someone get this man out of here, please. Everyone who thinks this is Luke, you're entitled to your opinion. But please go back and watch Return of the Jedi. And then think back on Episode VIII again. And just see if it even sounds logical how that man you see there became this one. Oh, and just to create a tad extra pain, they try to mirror Obi-Wan by saying, that boy is our only hope. By having Rey say, then he is our only hope, referring to Kylo Ren. It's just terrible. Luke would never have given up like that. And that's not just my fanboy, version, but the movie established one. Luke was the new hope. This man had none. Even now, though, as bad as what they've done was, maybe I could be less upset if they had at least ended it well. But then they couldn't even do that. Sure, the binary sunset scene with him fading away was beautiful and everything, but it was completely unnecessary. And Rey's like, I sensed Luke die. But it wasn't in pain or sadness. It was in peace and hope and with purpose and all that. As if to tell us, hey guys, Luke's death was good. It was good. Don't be mad. But why did they kill him at all? Rey still has had 0 training. I don't even really count those 3 lessons he said he was giving her, which, by the way, there were only 2. But I guess maybe they're just trying to do that leaving early thing like he did. But none of that was the same. Those were barely lessons. She's just still untrained. But now she's got to be Grandmaster of the New Jedi Order? They didn't have to kill Luke off at all. He could have just changed his attitude and agreed to be Rey's master and restore the Jedi Order, as was always his mission. But the writer, would rather ruin lore to pass a torch than to just do the movie right. But okay, say for some reason you absolutely have to kill Luke off. At least have him die actually in battle. Don't think I didn't see that X-Wing underwater, which he was taught how to lift in Episode V, which would be another great throwback they could have used. And don't think no one noticed that there were no lightsaber fights in this movie. No lightsaber duels, I mean. Not talking about when they beat up the Praetorian Guards, which I did really enjoy. But I was expecting Luke to have pulled up that X-Wing, flown to Crate, and then faced Kylo. Pull out his green lightsaber. I was in that theater finally getting hype. I was getting hyped, man. They had the perfect setup. Luke walks in front of everyone, and all the AT-ATs or whatever these ones are. They look kind of like guerrilla walkers to me. They were all aimed at him, and then they all fired. They could have finally given us an OP Jedi scene, especially if they're going to kill off such an iconic character anyway. They could have had Jedi Master Luke Skywalker on the scene. He could have reflected back the blasts. I hear he did that in Legends. Or shielding it or something, and then crush or topple the walkers over with the Force or something. Then Kylo comes out to face his old master, and we get an epic duel, Even though Luke should way outclass Kylo, but they already killed off Snoke for some reason, so that'd be the best we can get. But then, once Luke senses that the rebels have gotten away, he could say the whole, strike me down and I'll become more powerful. Or the, strike me down and I'll always be with you. Strike me down in anger and I'll always be with you. Just like your father. He could have said that thing and then surrendered himself to the Force just like Obi-Wan did. Boom. Perfect scene. He actually does fight Kylo Ren, and then at the end of the battle he goes to become one with the Force. You could have done that if you had to kill him. Which I still say was a bad call. But if you did have to, doesn't that just sound way better? Easy. But no, it's a hologram. Don't get me wrong, that is an amazing power, but it cheapens the scene because he's still not even there. He's still old man on his island. And there was no fight. And then they just kill him off. He's so exhausted that he just has to die. Haha, JJ can't use him now alive because I killed Luke Skywalker. Maybe Rian Johnson is the Sith Lord we've been looking for. I'm just trying not to turn to the dark side myself over this movie. But like I said, I can get over everything except what they did to Luke, man. It's not right. Not at all. They literally sacrificed one of the most iconic characters in Star Wars, and otherwise, in anything, in order to make Rey cooler and pass the torch and yada yada yada. Just disgusting. I barely even care about Rey. All I know is she's just some chick who is ultra powerful for some reason, who can just do everything automatically. No training necessary. I cared about Luke, and now he's dead. For no good reason, just wasted. Now Rey has to seek guidance from his ghost form, I guess, as well as use the books she fortunately stole to try to pick up everything, I guess. I don't know, maybe it's good she's super good at stuff, I guess, because she's going to need to do a lot of self-study now. So all in all, as a movie, just a generic movie, this one was good. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't a bad movie at all. But as a Star Wars movie, I felt it was terrible. It shows a fundamental lack of understanding for what a Star Wars movie should be. It's a terrible addition to the lore, particularly the Luke Skywalker parts, and I wish it could be removed from canon and they start over. If they could just say the part where he dies isn't canon, but the rest is, I mean, that's still pretty bad, but at least there would still be hope, I was very disappointed with this film, which is sad, because half of what I talk about on a daily basis is Star Wars. It's one of my favorite things. But this movie just didn't seem like Star Wars to me. A decent Rian Johnson film, I guess, but not a good Star Wars movie. And again, that's not just fanboy disappointment that my preconceived expectations were shattered. No, I did have them, sure, but I would have loved this if this movie just had what makes Star Wars without ruining Luke Skywalker. You know, Luke Skywalker is Star Wars. If you ruin him, you ruin Star Wars. Like, how can I go back and watch the original trilogy again, knowing Luke will eventually end up being that, you know, what we saw in Episode VIII. Like, doesn't matter how much of a hero he is, doesn't matter about his hero's journey, you know, he's just... they all have miserable lives. Han had a miserable life, you know, him and Leia separated, you know, they were both just off doing their own things for a long time. Their kid turned evil. They're just old, alone, you know. Luke, alone, old, on an island, failed, sad, miserable, wants to die, wants the Jedi to end. You know, all our heroes from the original trilogy are just miserable and lived horrible lives. Like, it purposely just destroyed everything. Like, you gotta understand. People have been wondering what happened after Episode VI, Return of the Jedi, since 1983. And there's been books to fill it in and things like that, which everyone accepted as canon, you know, as canon as it could get. Even George Lucas was like, yeah, everybody is filling in the lore. Star Wars is so huge, I couldn't possibly do it all on my own. So he was even aware of all this, and he's like, yeah, it's right. But now Disney bought it, is like, nope, that's not right. So, okay, sure. They have the right to do that. It's their thing now. They can make it whatever they want. But to just destroy it like that, it's just downright disrespectful. How can I watch the originals now knowing that it's just all these heroes, you know, see them celebrating? Yeah, well, you better enjoy it, because they won't be happy anymore after this, you know. All that was temporary. They're gonna die sad and alone with basically the same evils that were there before. Some evil empire-like thing destroying the small rebel alliance, you know. It's like everything you did just bought you a few extra decades. Couple extra decades of time, you know. It was all really just a waste. You might as well have just let the empire reign, because you're right back in the exact same position you were at before. Except now your nephew is the emperor. Because Kylo's, I don't know if you all caught that, Kylo's the supreme leader now of the First Order. And the First Order has, you know, command of almost all the major systems. And they will in a couple weeks. And that's the thing, they still probably will get all the major systems, because now Luke is dead. He can't just go save the day. They're down to like a handful of rebels left in the Rebel Alliance. Akbar is dead. Everybody's dead. Except Leia. And rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. But, you know, she can't be in 9. And they killed off Luke. They killed off Han, which means Chewie's the only like original. Chewie and R2 and C-3PO are the only originals left. They're not, you know, rebel leaders. I guess Chewie maybe, but maybe R2. I don't know. But they can't, you know, they're still in a terrible position. It's like the whole original trilogy was just, it bought you a little time, but, you know, you're right back to square one. So it's just, there's so much they could have easily done to make this movie better, and I'm just disappointed. If it were up to me, you know, everybody thinks, you know, they could write it better, but I genuinely think, because like I said, it's a fundamental lack of understanding of what makes Star Wars Star Wars, what makes a Star Wars movie a Star Wars movie. You know, I liked the prequels. A lot of people didn't like the prequels, but the prequels are more Star Wars than this movie was. You know, it at least felt like Star Wars. Yeah, there was a lot of boring politics and walking and talking and sitting and talking and all that, but it was still Star Wars. This, it's like, take everything you know about Star Wars, take everything you like about Star Wars and throw it away. Sure, it's a good movie. If this was any other movie, maybe I'd be saying it's good, right? But this is the 8th main series movie. It's not on its own, right? It's not a standalone film. It's one of 8. And you just have this one just, mess up 40 years of Star Wars. So, I don't know. What are you gonna do? I guess that's why I don't want this movie to be canon. I'm sorry. As good as some parts were, if it's left as canon that this what happened to Luke Skywalker, that's just a shame. Who allowed this to happen? Who let this happen? Who read this and thought it was a good idea? They should hire like 5 Star Wars fans, like just from the general public, contractually obligate them not to say anything, give them some perks or incentives to make sure they don't, have them screen your idea for the movie, and then see what they say. Because any Star Wars fan that now, I do understand that there are some people that like this movie, sure. But I don't understand how you can appreciate the original trilogy and then see what happened to the original trilogy characters and not care and think, oh yeah, it's just so bold, so brave what he's doing. Like, who cares about bold and brave when it messes up the movie, when it messes up the Star Wars saga? Like, I don't know. The Force Awakens was just a copy of Episode 4, but I would have rathered a copy of Episode 5 than something that, makes Episode 5 worthless now. That's just my opinion. Everybody's entitled to theirs. Maybe you disagree with me. What do you guys think? Do you just completely disagree with me, or do you think I'm spot on? I understand we all have our own certain point of view. I came in really wanting to love this movie. Sadly, I was disappointed. But I know there were a lot of mixed feelings, Even I had mixed feelings. There were some scenes I liked, like when they were fighting the Praetorian Guard. That was a great scene. But, what are we going to do? Episode 9, maybe. Episode 9, it was all a dream. Because, JJ and Rian Johnson are kind of just like going back and forth on who's writing it. Like, JJ wrote something and then Rian Johnson just doesn't answer any of his questions, messes up what he was trying to do. So JJ can come and mess up what he was trying to do by saying like everything you just saw was a dream. Episode 9, it was all a dream. That would just make this whole era of Star Wars just a train wreck. But honestly, if it meant 8 wasn't canon, sure. Maybe they could do something. If they could at least if they could just say that last scene where Luke fades away isn't canon. Just make that part of Legends. Ooh, you could make Episode 8 part of Legends. And someone was saying, they've taken away stuff in Star Wars before. They took away 30 years of books and cartoons and stuff. They could take, in games, they could take away one movie, right? Make it part of Legends. Or if you could just take away the part where he dies, we can have hope that he'll be better in the next movie. Be like, yeah, I was tripping for several years, but now I'm ready to be Jedi Master Luke Skywalker again and help you out. I don't know. Anyway, end of rant. Please comment down below your thoughts on the matter. If you did enjoy the video, though, please consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribing. This has been Jeroogalo. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you always.